Welcome back, everybody, to another fun episode of Indie Reads Aloud. Today, we have author LS Kirkpatrick, and she's going to be reading Marta's Jade, a novella that she wrote today. Just to give everybody a little bit of a heads up on today's episode, there is a listener advisory. There's some mature content, including drugs and violence. So if you have any young people listening in or watching the program, please preview this episode before you allow them to listen. LS, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
This is super fun. Tell us all where you're coming to us from.
From Boise, Idaho.
Idaho, out in the middle. I'm so glad we got somebody out in the middle of the country.
All right.
I've been keeping track of where everybody's coming from, so this is pretty exciting. We've had some overseas people and mostly around the eastern seaboard of the United States. So I'm really super excited to have you representing the middle of the country. So
all right.
Thanks
glad
so much
to do
for
that.
being here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here today.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
LS Kirkpatrick gains inspiration from life itself. We're all connected through personal encounters. Some are brief, while others are lifelong relationships. She is a writing coach, a legacy author, and an author of fiction, children's stories, adult fiction, and youth coming-of-age stories. She is an international Amazon #1 best-selling author in 13 categories for an anthology she co-authored titled Modern Day Miracles Experienced by Ordinary People. That's quite an achievement. Congratulations to you and your fellow authors. 13 categories is a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was well worth it. You know, it's you're always so nervous, you know, like anything else.
Sure. Like any child we send out into the world, we're always nervous. So today the story that we're going to hear is Marta's Jade. It's a mystery. Born into a family of addiction, Jade grew up fast. She was taught how to safely handle a handgun by the age of 4. She was also taught how to pay the bills, collect the mail, and hide where no one could find her. After a multi-body crime which included the death of her mother, she hid from the police and was on her own at the age of 9. Did she murder all those people in the house? How did she survive? Are there really angels? Who is this child genius? And did she really do it? What is the real story? This sounds serious. I think this is going to be an interesting tale to hear. When you're ready, LS, please take the microphone and read aloud.
Okay, let's get going. Chapter 1, An Unusual Day. Today may have started like any other, but this was not just another ordinary day. I have written a lot of life stories for families, for documentaries, for the elite and the ordinary person. This day was not like that. It may have looked the same on the outside. A simple breakfast with the aroma of coffee filling the air, the hurry of kids getting ready for school, the laundry being washed as my wife was muttering under her breath that it was making that noise again, and she was going to find out what it was if it was the last thing she did today. God love her, because I sure did. Are you ready for this day? She inquired with a look of sympathy, but also compassion on her face. How could one be ready for a day like today? I answered her honestly. This certainly is not like the typical work I do, I added. I was a writer, but not of stories and such. I recorded, took notes of family members telling their stories to later be turned into life stories that they could do whatever with. Sometimes it was to pass on life stories that had been hidden until the patriarch or matriarch knew life was soon to come to an end for them and the skeletons in their closet. They needed to be released. For others, it was to get to the truth of who belonged to whom and which relative did what, and to help get it all straightened out before there was no one left to tell the stories. Sometimes this was needed for family disputes that were going to court, but usually it was a way for the elder in the family to pass on the understanding behind the legacy of their family. There were some clients that just wanted to tell about an incident to make sure there was no confusion as to what really happened. Today, today was like nothing I'd ever taken part in before. Today was going to be the life story of a child. How could a child have a life story? A story, maybe, but a life story? We were to meet her in a modified interrogation room. Why an interrogation room and why modified? I did not know. I was assured of my safety, that there was nothing to worry about. That part worried me. What was with this 10-year-old? Why was this child in prison? And why in the world would they want me, someone who took the stories of the elderly, to talk with a child? My questions would be answered soon enough. I hugged my wife, told her to quit talking to the washing machine, and she laughed as I gathered my things for work. Things I had prepared the night before in case I remembered something during the night or early morning that I might have forgotten. Remember, she is only a child, my wife said, standing in the doorway in her bathrobe that covered her sharks chasing fish fin, pajamas and slippers. I finished loading the briefcase in the back seat, closed the door, and looked at my wife. Even at her age, her weight, and in her robe and slippers, I still saw her as the young woman I fell in love with. I smiled and said I would remember, then got in and headed to work. When I arrived, I had to have my ID checked, briefcase gone through, and then was taken straight to the room. It was a bare room with a chair and a sofa. A small table was brought in, a request I said was necessary for my equipment. There was no floor lamp or much of anything else. There was plenty of light from the skylight. The walls were very tall to the ceiling. Even if all the meager furniture were stacked on end, it could not reach the ceiling. I began to wonder again what crime this child could have committed, and what was it that I had really got myself into. I set things up and in she walked. A little bit of a thing. She looked younger than her age, what struck me as strange. In this day and age, it seemed that grade schoolers were trying to look like adults, which bothered me a lot. Kids should be kids for as long as they can. Adulthood is tough enough without trying to rush it along. There were 3 guards, one carrying folding chairs, one accompanying her, and one walking 2 other children who looked more of her age. A doctor with clipboard followed, along with a lovely woman I had worked with before. I call her lovely because she had such a joyful nature. Leslie, it is so good to see you. I did not know you were going to be here, I said in genuine surprise. I took her hands in mine and held them gently. Leslie was a shorter, older woman who was afflicted with arthritis. She always wore decorative scarves. They helped to keep the chill off her shoulders, she told me once. We never hugged, as it was too painful to her. Leslie was a genealogist, not just any genealogist, but one of the best in her field. She could take some of the toughest situations and dig deep into places others would not have thought to look. Her mind was sharp, and her sense of direction for finding the correct information was uncanny. As I said, I had worked with her before, and it was actually reassuring to see her here today. Miss Leslie, asked the young girl, I would like you to sit here on the sofa with me. I think you will find it most comfortable and easier on your body than a folding chair. She smiled and sat down. I sat down too, then leaned forward and turned on the digital tape recorder. I then sat back with pen and notebook in hand and spoke. This is the 12th of December, 2020. I am talking with 10-year-old Jade Yardena regarding her life story, and we are recording this with her permission. Do I have your permission, Miss Yardena, to record this conversation? I waited for her reply. Oh, yes, I don't mind telling you about my life, she said to me. Please state your full name. My full name, she says with a giggle. I hardly ever get asked that. My full name is Jaden Quinn Eski Yardena, but please call me Jade. Do you know how I know my full name? She asked with anticipation that I would not know. Then, without waiting for me to answer, she opened her hand and held it forward to Leslie, as if offering it to her as a special treasure. Miss Leslie, I would like you to have this. It is the only thing my mother ever wore, besides her clothes, of course. They said I could give it to you. Leslie looked at the guards and they nodded in approval, and she held her hand out as the young girl tilted her own hand and poured the necklace out. Leslie looked at it. It looked like nothing more than the military dog tags you would get at a novelty store. How curious, I thought. Leslie looked it over and then wrote in her yellow ledger. I had seen her use that yellow ledger on several occasions. She told me the yellow helped the writing stand out better, and since it was longer than a spiral notebook, she could get more information on a page. She also said because of the stiff cardboard back, it was easier for drawings and writing on, like a little table. Please proceed, I said in a monotone voice. I found that a tone that was neutral seemed to ease the speaker to just start where they could and not feel like they were under pressure. I think the best place to begin is from my earliest memories. I would have been about 1.5 or 2 years old, I think. Would that be okay? She asked in such a polite and gentle voice. Yes, start with your earliest memory. That would be good, I replied, though I myself couldn't remember anything before the age of 5 or 6. I had talked with other people who had very early childhood memories, though, so this did not surprise me. I hope you are comfortable. This isn't much, but I guess it's all we could afford. Are you comfortable? She asked with concern in her voice. I have to admit, I was a little taken back by this. What did she mean it was all we could afford? I had never met a person so young that really cared about the comfort of adults. But I answered her, yes, this is comfortable. I'm all right. Good, she stated. Well, I guess the earliest memory I have is when my mother would give me my vitamins. I think I remember it because that day she gave them to me in a little cup instead of a spoon. I told her spoon, as I did not know very much in the way of language at the time, but she said no. I replied back, spoon. She said, you are very smart, but today you get some extra. We don't want you getting a cold now, do we? I guess we did not. I wasn't sure what a cold was, but it didn't sound like I would want one, so I drank the vitamins. And it was not very good. Maybe I didn't notice the strange taste of it before because it was always in a spoon. She paused. I guess the next memory I have is my mom holding me and rocking me back and forth. She was sitting on the floor and crying really hard. She kept saying, I'm Susie, I'm Susie. It was difficult to understand her, though, the sobbing and all the wet tears and wet hair that would get all over my face, and she just kept rocking back and forth and crying and saying, I'm Susie. You see, that is how I know her real name was Susie. I know my tummy was hurting, but I almost didn't notice because she was holding me really tight and rocking back and forth and kept crying. I know her friends would call her Marta. I think it was a pet name for her. Actually, they called her, Sign Me Up, Marta. And I only know that because one time some of her friends came over and they were laughing and one asked her, do you want to try some? I don't know what some was. I was too small to see over the table yet. And she said, Sign me up. And they all laughed and said, okay, you heard her. Sign me up, Marta wants to try some. I don't know what happened after that. The memory just stops there. When her friends called her by name, they almost always called her, Sign me up, Marta. Let's see. After she revealed to me that her name was really Susie, she stopped giving me the vitamins. I only know that because I said spoon to her again, and she said I was so big and strong now that I didn't need them anymore. Okay, I thought, and then sit down and played. I had a little stuffed toy. I think it was a squirrel. I chewed on its ears and carried it everywhere with me. That's funny. I can't remember any other toys I had. Sometimes I get flashes of sunshine on my face as I'm riding in a car, but I don't know if that was a dream or real. It's just bits and pieces at a time. My parents used to fight a lot, not just yell, but really fight. I don't know what they were so angry about. There were always bottles and stuff all over when the fights would happen. The first one I remember is when they both had arms swinging and shouting, and then a single hit and my mom was on the floor laying down. Really weird. Dodd just stood there swaying back and forth and looking at her. I didn't know what to do. I remembered one time when I fell down, Mom helped me up and told me not to cry and that I was okay. It was just a little bump. So I started to go over to Mom and do the same for her. I am not sure how it happened, but I heard, stay away. and then felt my ear and side of my head hurt. And the next thing I know, my dog is leaning over me and I'm laying down next to my mom and he is crying. And I think he was saying to my mom, "Wake up." His voice was cracking and quiet, almost like if he, sorry, I lost my place. His voice was cracking and quiet, almost like if he said it louder that either one of us would wake up. I could feel my mom's warm body next to me and it felt comforting. Her heart was beating fast, but now that I say it, I wonder if it was my own heart I recognized, as the ear inside of my head was hurting really bad and making a funny sound. Tears came to my eyes, but I remembered my mom telling me not to cry. When I get hurt, it's probably just a bump. I'm not sure how long I lay there next to her, doll leaning over us, smelling funny, saying the same thing over and over in his cracked and quiet voice. Eventually, I could feel Mom start to make movements. Da cried even harder and gasped for breath. He pulled us both so tight and close to him. It felt nice, all of us together like that, something I had never felt before. His voice couldn't make the words I could understand, but it almost looked like a smile on his face. I had never seen him smile before. Never. I just didn't know what to make of it all. It was just so different from our normal. And normal is what happened after that. A memory later was when a lot of their friends were at our house. Well, now I can't really call it a house. Mom called it our thimble because she said it wasn't much bigger than one. I remember it had the sleeping room, the bathroom, and the kitchen and living room were kind of next to each other. It was plenty big, I thought, but not when a lot of their friends were at our house. It would be loud and crowded, and people would fall and spill stuff, even food. I used to hide behind the sofa. I was small enough that even if it got shoved all the way to the wall, it still left a space between the bottom of it and the wall that me and my toy could hide there and be safe. And that sofa hit the wall a lot from people bumping into it and falling on it. This one time when their friends were at our house, this new friend, he was scary. Kind of made me angry. I'm not sure why, but I felt very angry every time I looked at him. I stayed away and stayed behind the sofa most of the night. I started to come out once, but because I was getting hungry, and I saw him swing his arm backwards and knock Mom to the floor. The next second, my dog was on him, beating him so badly, worse than he'd ever hit my mom. The other people there were yelling and trying to pull him apart, and finally, four of the men were able to get Daw up and off him. One woman was screaming at Daw and trying to get the man off the floor and screaming at Daw some more. Mom yelled at her and told her to get both of themselves out and never come back. I stayed behind the sofa all night and slept there until well into the next day. I'd never seen anything like that, ever. You know, I thought it was strange that Daw would hit Mom like that, but he sure never let anybody else do that to her. I guess that was love. I didn't know. I just knew that I saw Daw differently after that. Oh my, I just remembered that I did see my mom like that one time. That angry like Daw had been. It was another time when lots of their friends were there. This one guy kept calling himself my uncle. I didn't have any uncles, and I couldn't figure out why he said he was my uncle. There wasn't a lot of bottles around. This was the quieter, if you can call it that, parties where there was smoke and stuff all around. Kind of like when my mom got her name signed me up, Marta. Most all of the adults at the time would ignore me after they got there. I learned to make myself scarce and stay out of the way. I don't know why or how I learned that, but I did. Well, this uncle kept looking for me and finding me. He thought we were playing a game, but I was not wanting to be where he was. Then he just scooped me up and said we were going to play another game. And he was walking into the sleeping room. I didn't want to go with him and tried to get away, but he grabbed me really hard and tight. Couldn't see my mom anywhere. He started to close the door to the sleeping room when my mom and Da, laughing and holding on to one another, busted it open and fell on the bed. Mom looked up and saw me and shoved my Da off her like he was a piece of paper. She went from the bed to the man that was holding me so fast I could hardly catch my breath. I don't know how she got me out of his tight grip, but she did. And then just that fast, I was in the crib and her and Da were both giving that man what for. She was so red in the face and Da couldn't keep up with her. She was clawing and scratching and kneeing and stomping the man all the way out the door. I heard all three of them all the way of the outside door onto the street. It sounded like to me. Mom finally came in and asked if I was all right and turned me this way and that, checking me out. I don't know what she was looking for. And then Doc came in and asked if I was okay, and Mom said she thought so. She told him I was going to stay there the rest of the night, and she was going to stay with me and to close the door behind him. She did too. I stayed there in her arms while she rocked me, gently stroked my hair, and kept saying, I promise that will never happen again. I don't know what was never going to happen again, but her voice was reassuring and she held me wonderfully. It was so good to hear her repeat it. I didn't even mind the blood and sweat dripping off of her. Sleep came easy and restfully to me that night. Big fights that happened between Don and Ma were further apart. A lot of times at night, they would tell me it was time to sleep, and I would lay down in my crib and close my eyes, and I could hear the outside door close soon after. And it looks like we're out of time. Didn't even get to the real good stuff yet.
Oh my gosh, but the tension is mounting. We're going to have to go out and find the book so we can see how it all ends. This young child is really an intriguing character to me. What was the most surprising thing to you as you were writing this book? What was the thing that surprised you the most as you were writing it?
That I was writing it. I have no idea where this came from. And I just, I wake up like at 2 a.m. and a lot of times that's when I write because the house is quiet and I don't have to really wake anybody else up. And,
Sure.
And I just started writing, and I wanted to incorporate some things. I had a really happy childhood. I want to say that right now. I had an amazing family, but there were things that happened in my life that I did put into this book. And I wanted to tell the story, but tell it in a way that that wasn't just telling my story. And how I came up with this, I have no idea. Where this came from, I don't know.
So it came from the little voices in the back of your head.
Oh, they're just there all the time.
Yeah.
We have a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and reading on the program today.
Yeah, I wish I could have gotten into some of the more fun parts. Reading it, it's like, oh my gosh, did that come out of me?
As I said, now we'll just have to come back and listen. We'll go find the book ourselves and read it on our own. It's a novella, so it's a quick read.
Oh, very quick.
So anybody who's interested can go find it there. All the information is in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. And I hope you'll come back and read again for us another day.
Oh, I will. I've got some stories that aren't so horrific.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Ending, just so you know.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
All right, you too. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.